Hello, y'all. It's been a minute. I've been working hard on this episode. It's a really personal one, so I've tried to be as thorough as possible. The month of October is over, sadly, but November isn't that bad, and neither is December. I say that, but those months hold so much sadness for me personally. As time goes by, family gatherings seem to get smaller and smaller for one reason or another. I'm going to talk about one of those major reasons in this episode. I will probably cover this topic over the course of 2 episodes, maybe even 3. I said in the last episode that I wanted to eventually cover the topic of grief and how it presents itself in my dreams. Well, the time has come. I have come to terms with many of the deaths that have happened in my life. Death is a part of life. You can't prevent it. The living keep on living and the dead, well, they stay dead. And I know there's many beliefs about what happens after death. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about my personal beliefs. All I'm going to say in regards to that is that my relatives that have passed, they continue to live in my heart, my mind, and in my dreams. I have mixed feelings when my relatives visit me in my dreams. Sometimes I feel joy because in a way I get to see them again. It feels so real. And then there are other times when I feel distressed upon awakening. I feel fear or sorrow, or I just feel like a vast emptiness. I get taken back to the first waves of grief I felt when learning about their passing. There was a time where I remembered the dates of their passing, the order, how long it's been since their passing, but death just kept coming and coming. I didn't have the mentality to even keep track anymore when the number of deaths surpassed around 7. Now it's probably like at 14 or 15 or even more. I don't know. I would have to make a list. It's just been that many. When you have such a large family, the reality is that there's going to be that amount of funerals too, a large number. And the causes of their deaths are going to also largely vary. It's very tragic, but that's how it is. Dealing with such grief has affected my life so much in many ways. One of those being what I mentioned earlier about how family gatherings are not the same as they used to be. There was a time I got to spend Christmas and New Year's in Mexico, like every single year. I would go back and forth between my mom's side of the family, and then later that day I would go to my dad's side of the family. I looked forward to that every single year until it was no longer possible because some of the central players of those family reunions were no longer with us. And like everyone kind of went their own way, did their own thing. So reunions were not the same. Before, it was a sure plan of what was gonna happen, like what I was gonna do for the holidays. Now it feels like I scramble around to find out where I'm going and who I'm spending the holidays with. This last Christmas, I spent it with some of my cousins, only on my dad's side. None of us were with our parents for one reason or another. And now I'm not complaining that, like, boo, I had to spend it with so-and-so and not so-and-so. No way. I appreciate everyone, and I appreciate that I still have them all in my life. Being alive is a blessing. I'm grateful I had the chance to spend the holidays with them, and I'm grateful they got the chance to be there too. I've lived through too many days where I had no idea that was going to be the last day I'd be seeing them. So I appreciate my life and other people's lives a whole lot more. Like I said earlier, I've come to the understanding that death is part of life. It took a lot of time to get to that point. Time heals, it does, but it more so gave me the chance to change my perspective of things. The hurt is there, it will always be there, and it's especially true for my relatives that were robbed of their lives. And what I mean by that is that so many of them died not by reaching old age, so many died tragically, and I will never be okay with how their lives were taken from them. I will never be okay with how our lives were robbed of their presence. Now, I'm not gonna go into detail on how each and every one of them died. This is just to talk about their presence in my dreams. I may mention a thing or two, but no, that's not what this is. But yeah, it is so obvious in some of my dreams the injustice that I feel about their deaths, the lingering grief, the desire to have them right in front of me and to never let them leave. I have dreamt about almost everyone that I've lost, and I'm gonna talk about them. There are a couple of relatives which I don't remember dreaming of, but it was probably just too long ago and I just don't remember. I never wrote anything down. The first death I experienced of a close relative was that of my Aunt Alma. I was maybe 14. I was sad, but I hadn't experienced a death in the family before, so I don't think I fully processed it at the time. I went to her funeral. I remember my mom took me out of the church because people were bawling their eyes out and yelling. She didn't want me to be traumatized by the way they expressed their grief. Little did she know that was just the beginning. But I get it now. The desperation, the helplessness, the emptiness. I get the screaming and crying over their loved one. I don't remember any dreams about my aunt, but I do remember her contagious laughter and her bright smile. I keep her in my heart. The second death I experienced completely shattered me. It broke so many of my family members, and seeing them broken broke me even more. My cousin Chucho. Death can be unexpected, and boy, his death shocked everyone. I've dreamt about him so much from the time of his death in 2011 till most recently earlier this year. Okay, well, it turned out I have a lot to say, so I'm sorry. Anyways, before my cousin's passing, I had this dream. This was in 2011, like 5 days before he passed away. My parents and I were going to Mexico for fall break in my uncle's truck, my cousin's dad. I was laying down in the bed of the truck. We stopped at a cafe. As I walked up the brick stairs, my mom told me to look over at a guy that was going down the stairs. Then she said the number 88 aloud. I looked over, but I didn't really know why I was looking at him. And then I looked at his socks. They were white and pulled up to his knees. Apparently they had the word 88 written on them, or the number 88. I thought nothing of it. I posted this dream online. I have an online journal. I posted it there, and someone commented saying, I read that 88 can mean bye-bye in the Chinese language and text. I did look it up, and in fact 88 is used in Chinese chats and text messages because the pronunciation of 88 in Mandarin is similar sounding to the words bye-bye. And that gave me the shivers when I saw that. And then 2 nights after my cousin died, I had this dream about him. I was at a gas station, but apparently it was a murder scene. I saw a body from afar. Then I left. In the next part of the dream, there was a school bus. As I was getting in it, the bus driver called me by my name. She told me to watch out for water that was being sprayed. My cousin, Angelica, which is my cousin Chucho's sister, she was on the bus, and she told me to be careful. When I got on the bus, it turned into a grayish van. In it were a lot of seat cushions stacked up. I could barely fit. And then my cousin Chucho tried to get in the van, but he couldn't fit at all. So my cousin Angelica told me to help her fix the seats to make room for him. We were going to put the seat cushions in the back of the van, but then their mom opened up the back door and then she started putting stuff back there. So Angelica and I, we were unable to make room for my cousin, and he never got in. The next dream was 3 years after his passing. I was at Yemen, which was a map on a video game I used to play. Chucho was in the main room. He had a cane and was limping. He didn't tell me, but I knew that his colon hurt. I called 911. The operator wasn't asking any protocol questions like, what's your emergency, what's your location, nothing like that. I just remember her saying that I had to take a picture of myself to go with the phone call. Then Chucho left the room, but he came back. He returned with a bag of ice, and the ice eased his pain. Someone wanted to get in the room with him, but my cousin wouldn't let them. And then someone just slid food through a door. And I didn't write this down, but I have a faint memory that he was either chained up or in a cell. I'm not sure. One thing about Chucho, whenever I do dream about him, I don't ever really hear his voice, but I did find one where I did hear him say something. This one was in June 2017, 6 years after his passing. I remember seeing Chucho's restless body. I don't know if I did it or how it happened, but he came back to life. I didn't have much reaction. It was like he was just sleeping and then he woke up. I think I showed him one of his old game saves and then some of his newer saves or newer games. But he couldn't play the new games because he was from the past where they didn't even exist. I heard him whisper something about how he shouldn't have had the Red Bull and that 5-hour energy drink, that he wouldn't have died in the first place. And then in another part, I was with him and my brother, my cousins, Javi and Kiko. We were watching a movie. This next dream I had in 2021, 10 years after his death. I was with family somewhere. We were all hungry. Someone walked ahead and found a place to eat. I guess it was a fancy torta or sandwich place, but I couldn't really understand the menu. I had seen a smaller, more family-friendly place 2 booths back, so we went to that one instead. The guy at the counter was making tortas de carnitas, or pork sandwiches, which was what I wanted. The guy happened to be my cousin Chucho. So I asked him to make me a torta. He didn't speak, but he looked happy. I remember another dream where he was at a gas station. He wanted me to help him move a car out of the way. Then he left. His sisters were there too, and they said that before he left they heard him singing. In another, he was playing guitar, and another, he was at a bar with an uncle. So in these more recent dreams, he seems to be having a good time listening or playing to music, and it's what brought us together. I remember debating about the correct way to play for Elise, and then he liked how Coldplay's clock sounded on the keyboard when I would play it. And I also just remember him always singing. He loved music. Now, I'm not really gonna analyze those dreams, but it's apparent that I was struggling to accept his death. I wanted him to continue his journey with the living, like I wanted him to get in the van in the dreams. I wanted him to be alive again, and as time has progressed, the nature of the dreams he's been in changed to be more positive. I still have deep sadness and I still grieve for him, but I think I've just gotten so used to not seeing him anymore that I'm more accepting of the fact that he's not here with us. The death after my cousin happened when I was still deeply mourning him. It happened in December, only a couple of months after his. It was my grandma. The trauma was very apparent in the dreams I had of her. This one I had in 2012, almost a year after her passing. I was at some fast food restaurant. I went to get something out of a red car. Then I think it ended up being a blue Dodge Ram truck. I reached inside to get whatever it was I was getting, and then I turned around to see my grandma. She was fatter and had a head full of white hair. I told her, "I thought you were dead." She replied with, "That's what they made you think. They locked me in their truck." I don't know what else she said. That creeped me out. In the next part, I was in a forest, and the trees were so high. I looked up at them just thinking, I don't want the owls to fall. I never saw any owls. I felt scared. And I heard a noise and went back to wherever I was, whatever I was doing. There was another one that messed with my head. This one was in 2013, 2 years after her passing. I remember being in Mexico. My mom, dad, brother, and grandmother were there. We all saw the news on TV showing that a flood was coming our way. We called it a flood, but really it was like a tsunami. My dad wanted to take us all to this one place because he claimed that the city had tall houses that we could stand on. And all of us knew that wasn't true. My brother wanted to go to my grandmother's house and stand on the roof because her house was the tallest house in the city. I didn't know what to do. I went to my grandmother for advice. She was sitting in a wheelchair, and next to her was a dugout grave. Behind her was the dirt that had been dug out of that grave. My grandmother told me that I should go wherever I felt the most protected. She asked me if I felt more protected with my parents, my brother, or with someone else. someone like a significant other. I think I might have said significant other, but then I also said, but he's not here. I remember going with my parents. My dad got my grandmother on our truck. I got on. Then I told them that we really shouldn't go over there where my dad wanted to go. I just kept looking back, knowing that the roof of my grandmother's house was the safest. I think we might have gone back to her house because I remembered saying, how are we going to get my grandmother up all these stairs? Which her house, it has a lot of stairs. But yeah, my dad, he just said, oh, we will. And that was it. And I just noticed that she did speak in that dream. So that was interesting. But all these years, I would randomly think about that dream and how creepy it was that my dead grandmother had asked me to join her in the grave. And that's not even how the dream played out. So it's kind of funny how our memories work. There was another dream where my grandma wasn't walking. I was pushing her in a wheelbarrow, and then she gave me a necklace. And that was really it that I wrote down and that I can remember right now. I find it bizarre that in many dreams I have of her, she can't walk. And that's what happened when she had her stroke. We had to help her do everything during the last months of her life. I mentioned before how I kept track of the order of everyone's deaths and which days they died. I don't even remember who came after my grandma. I want to say it was my Aunt Myra. I don't know. The dreams I've had about her aren't as dark as other people's. The darkest one was probably seeing her funeral. I didn't get to go to her funeral, but in my dreams, her funeral was at her grandma's house. I went in and all her family was there, including her husband, my uncle Ruben. They had candles all around her casket. They were praying. Another sad one was of her and my uncle Ruben, who also passed away a few years later. They were there with their daughter. They were holding hands. She was in the middle. They walked towards me and they left my cousin there with me and walked away. It was like them saying, here, you're in charge of her now. Another dream happened around the time I got engaged. I dreamt that I told my aunt that I got engaged and I showed her my engagement ring. She was happy, she was smiling. See, those dreams reveal a lot about my feelings too. Like, I felt a lot of sadness that I didn't get to go to her funeral, that I wasn't able to be there for my uncle and my cousin and my mom, everyone. It was hard being so far away from everyone during this time. And there's also sadness in the fact that I can't see my aunt's excitement anymore, and it's evident in those dreams. I see her beautiful beaming smile. She was one of my closest aunts. I knew her before she even married my uncle, so I was excited when they did get married. Okay, y'all. I really can't remember who was next. I know I lost my grandpa around the time I lost my Aunt Myra. I haven't really seen him in my dreams after his death. I guess because I wasn't as close to him as my other relatives, or perhaps because I just didn't see him as much as I saw them. When I did see him, he didn't talk a lot. He was nice. He always provided for his family as much as he could. I remember him always bringing us bread to eat with hot chocolate. He'd always bring home fruits. He never came home empty-handed. Another relative I rarely dream about is one of my dad's uncles. I used to see him every time we went to Mexico too. Every single Christmas break. I looked forward to seeing him, even though he scared me a little. He was funny though. I wrote down one dream he was in, but I can't remember when I had it, if I had it before he died or after he died. I think it was after. But I was laying down in a bed and I heard an ambulance. Then 2 paramedics walked in. They had my dad's uncle lying on a stretcher, and they brought him into the room and they laid him on the bed right next to me. I thought that was so creepy. The last relative I'll talk about in this episode is my great-grandpa. He lived a really, really long life. So I think that's why in the only dream I remember him being in, he was happy. So this actually was part of the same dream I mentioned earlier where I went to my Aunt Myra's funeral. It started off with my dad driving and we arrived to Mexico. As soon as my great-grandpa saw the truck, He got his cane and he rushed over to meet us at the front door. He had the biggest smile on his face. It was so nice to see him that way because near the end of his life, he couldn't really see anymore or walk, so it was nice to see him healthier and smiling, happy to see my dad. He loved my dad. Okay, y'all. Well, that's it. Sorry for a long episode. It's nice to talk about them, keep their memories alive. Oh, I actually had a dream this weekend of my Aunt Myra. I think I dreamt that I was working on this. I was working on my Aunt Myra's part. So I was explaining the dreams I was having of her in my dream. I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, that's about it. Okay, y'all. That's it for this episode. I don't really have a conclusion for this because there's going to be a part 2. But yeah, don't let the bed bugs bite.